Good evening, everyone, coast to coast. Tonight on CBS Television News, we will be joined by a multitude of controversial leaders. Tonight at 7:30 in New York City. Thanks for joining us. Today is November 10th, 1962. Tonight we will be discussing many important events, including the Bay of Pigs disaster, our Central Intelligence Agency, and the Cuban Missile Crisis. Let's welcome our first guest to the show, President John F. Kennedy. So, I gotta ask, what were you thinking with the Bay of Pigs fiasco? You really helped us out there, got Castro to run back to Khrushchev. From my interview with a local, I mentioned that from my well-rounded army background, I thought your staff and advisory process was to blame from the impulsive decision to take back arms support and supplies to Cuban exiles. So what happened there?
No, before you criticize me, the audience ought to know it was you who planned the invasion in the first place.
Clearly, you didn't read my plan. I called for some air support, an idea that you shot down. I wonder why the Cuban Air Force had such an easy time hitting our poor boys.
Now, Mr. President, let's make the distinction clear. The United States of America did not invade a foreign sovereign state. I will confess the group of around 1,400 exiled Cubans attempted to topple the Castro regime with our arms and funds from the CIA on April 15th of 1961. But once it was obvious that their attempts were failing and that no revolution was incited, I pulled back. I did not want the United States to be seen as the direct aggressor of the colony.
Yes, a blotched job indeed. With all due respect, Mr. President, is the State Department aware of the fate of the insurgents?
Unfortunately, we are. They were forced to surrender in less than 24 hours, 114 confirmed kills, and 1,100 taken prisoner. My thoughts and prayers are with them today on this night.
And one last thing, John. How did the Castro regime respond to these aggressions?
Well, to our great displeasure, on December 2nd, Castro declared, "I am a Marxist-Leninist and shall be one until the end of my life," confirming our suspicions with his alignment with the Soviet Union. And I'll say it here today, folks, and every coming day, communism will not be tolerated anywhere in the American hemisphere.
Well, I'm sure I'm not alone in saying, I hope you will stick to that commitment. We've been interrupted by a surprise guest, Miss Monroe, everyone.
Hey boys, see you later, Johnny.
See you tonight, Marilyn? I'm gonna hit that later tonight.
John, everyone already knew that. Anyways, the most important outcome of the Bay of Pigs, despite creating a major public relations disaster and violating international law with a failed coup attempt, was the Cuban Missile Crisis. Let's take a listen to your October 22nd speech concerning the Cuban Missile Crisis. For some background, America, our sources say President Kennedy was informed of nuclear installations that began construction in Cuba with the help of the Soviets, through photographs U-2 spy planes took. Because of Cuba's close proximity to our nation, and the obvious worry that communist doctrine would soon spread to other Latin American countries, Kennedy rightfully took action. I probably would have just utilized my massive retaliation doctrine and gone a different route versus your,
flexible response.
But none the matter. Let's listen in.
On this 22nd day of October 1962, I call upon Chairman Khrushchev to halt and eliminate this clandestine, reckless, and provocative threat to world peace and to stable relations between our two nations. He has an opportunity now to move the world back from the abyss of destruction by returning his government's own words that it had no need to station missiles outside of its own territory, and withdrawing these weapons from Cuba by refraining from any action which will widen or deepen the present crisis, and then by participating in a search for peaceful and permanent solutions. Thank you, America.
I couldn't have put it better myself. And now we're going to take a quick break, America. Back with you in a few.
Transmission from Soviet Union. Hey, America, would you rather have this fat capitalist scum stinking up the whole place? Or would you rather have this Slavic squatters enjoying nice time with vodka, cigarettes, and cards? Yeah? Come to Soviet Union. You can defect at Checkpoint Charlie. Berlin Wall, Berlin, East Germany.
Welcome back, America. I now want to bring on our two other guests for the night, Nikita Khrushchev and Fidel Castro, to discuss their actions in relation to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Welcome, gentlemen. Sorry, one chair was all we could muster up. You guys are used to sharing, though, I'm sure. Castro, I want to begin with you, asking what you hope to change in your country when you came to power.
All I wanted was a prosperous and independent Cuba. Before our revolution took down Batista, Cuba was the brothel of the Western Hemisphere, an island inhabited by people degraded and hungry, whose main occupation was to cater to the American tourists at Havana's luxurious hotels, beaches, and casinos. Once I destroyed this, the U.S. restricted all trade and forced me to align with the Soviet Union, so I was able to provide the best for my people and my country.
So you admit you are a commie? What of the missiles?
I never said that. The USSR offered the Cuban people security in the time of need against your attempted imperial conquest of our lands. The missiles are simply a deterrent. I promised that the result of aggression against Cuba would be the start of a conflagration of incalculable consequences, and the West would be affected too.
Thank you, Castro. Premier Khrushchev, what do you think of the crisis?
I have no regrets over my actions in Cuba. The Soviet Union worked all throughout the crisis to maintain peace in the region, and as I said in my speech to the RFSR Teachers Conference in Moscow when I pitched the idea of missiles to Cuba, the missiles in Cuba were only there to defend the sovereignty of the nation of Cuba from imperialist aggression from the United States. I am going to say this once, Ike, and I don't want to say it again. Those missiles were never intended to preemptively strike the United States mainland. They simply acted as a deterrent for future imperialist intervention in Cuba. The missiles were nothing more than a warning to the United States of the consequences of trying to destabilize Castro's regime and trying to reinstate their own puppet government.
So then why remove the missiles and send your ship back? Wouldn't that leave Cuba vulnerable? Do you have any regrets about that?
No. Did you hear what I just said, Ike? I have no regrets. Everything I did in Cuba was to maintain peace in the region. In one of my last letters to President Kennedy regarding the issue, you can ask him, I made clear that the removal of the missiles was to guarantee peace in the region. We agreed to remove the missiles, and the US agreed to stay the hell out of Cuba, therefore guaranteeing their national security. Nuclear war was avoided, and Cuba remained a country of the people. So to reiterate, I have no regrets with what I did with the Cuban situation. Oh, and one more thing. We also got the US to secretly agree to remove their missiles from Turkey. Don't tell Kennedy I told you that.
Nikita, you weren't supposed to say that, and you know that. And if you ask me, you lost in the crisis. We sent you commies back to your country with your tails between your legs. Let the adults talk. As I said in my November 6th letter to you, any Soviet installation in the Western Hemisphere will be taken as a threat, and I mean that.
You cannot be serious. You cannot stop the people from exerting their will upon your imperialistic, gluttonous regimes. How dare you call us cowards? You rat-faced capitalist! I dare you to say that one more time. I will send my support back to Cuba and dance upon the radioactive ashes upon your gluttonous society.
Mr. Khrushchev, I urge you to refrain from your violent rhetoric. Any further threats will be taken as a hostile aggression.
I will show you what the hostile aggression is.
Holy cow, gentlemen! Arms down! Cut! Cut! I want to thank you for joining us for a nice civil discussion with our guests tonight. We will see you tomorrow evening for our next edition.